All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Retz. Ben, how are you, brother? It's been a minute.
I'm fantastic. And real quick, I just want to we took a week off and Marcos, I got to say congratulations. You are a married man now.
Yes,
You
sir.
are a hubby status and you are officially never going to be right again. So,
Yep, there we go.
congrats to you, brother.
The only place I can be right is here in this world of sports. But yeah, you're right. And I'm extremely blessed and I'm grateful and I'm super happy. And I'm happy you, Ryan, and my mom and those who could be there were there. And next Monday, we're going to go celebrate with my side of the family. And I love all of them and can't wait to see them. And it's been a nice, very incredible 10 days. So
Yes, sir. Congrats to you.
thank you, brother. I appreciate it. All right. But on top of all that, my nuptials and all, we got some good news from the Sacramento Kings and something we hung out on Saturday. And with you, me, and Ryan, we were all together and we were thinking, man, something's going to happen today. Like, we're getting these news, and then we hear all about DeMar DeRozan, and they're like, oh, maybe they're going to sign him. And we went home, and it still hadn't happened yet. And then you text us, you're like, it happened. Here we go. So the Kings performed a sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan. So he is now coming to Sacramento on a 3-year, $74 million deal. And with that, so the sign and trade, how that worked is DeMar agreed to come to Sacramento. So it wasn't just a straight up trade. He didn't come here against his will. He chose to come to Sacramento. And with that, we sent over Harrison Barnes and Chris Duarte, 2 second-round picks, and an unprotected pick swap with San Antonio, who was the third team in this trade in order to make it all happen. So the Spurs took on Harrison Barnes and then the unprotected pick swap with us 7 years from now in 2031. And then the Bulls kind of got the short end of the stick here from most fans and kind of the perspective. You're trading DeMar DeRozan and you get back Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks. Ben, what was your initial reaction to this pick or to this trade? How'd you feel? And did you think any side, who really won this deal in your opinion?
So, I mean, I'm hyped. We're going to talk about it, but it's probably the best signing in Kings history when you look at just how decorated DeMar is as a player in the league. What he brings to the table, what he brings to the game today as a 35-year-old is pretty incredible. He's still super efficient. He still played the most minutes out of any player last year. Like, the dude's he's still in his prime in a lot of ways, and I'm pretty hyped about that. As far as who won the trade, it's not close. I mean, the Kings won this. This was the piece that the Kings needed to take the next step. I'm not saying that we're a contender right now, but there is a conversation for that. But when I look at what Chicago got, Chicago just didn't want to take on more money. Yeah. And that's why they ended up getting what they got. And that's why fans are upset. But I'm sorry, you got somebody over there who's still getting paid $200+ million, and he just can't find ways to stay on the court. And nobody wants him because of that. And so you've got this contract that you've got to get through to the end of, and then you can start your official rebuild. And I mean, getting 2 second rounds, sure, that's good. I would be pissed as a Bulls fan. I'd be like, seriously, this is DeMar DeRozan. And when the Kings actually got this deal done, I'm hopping in comment sections all the time, and I'm looking through these, and Bulls fans are like, Kings fans, take care of this guy. Take care of Debo, take care of DeMar. He's the guy. He will do everything and more for your team. He did everything and more for our team. I don't know what the Bulls are doing right now. Obviously, he was going to get traded, but we didn't get crap in return. It is what it is. But I'm hyped, man. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and before we dig any more on DeMar, we got to give a shout out to Harrison Barnes. As much subject to criticism as he was ever since, whichever game it was, game 4, game 5, when he missed that 3, things kind of felt a little contentious as fans were like, we really needed him to step up. But the one thing about HB is not only is he an Iron Man, he's an absolute consummate professional, one of the best, most honest guys in the game, and he's someone that you can respect. And when he got traded here to Sac, it was 5 seasons ago, I believe. He helped turn this team around by being a veteran presence. And I wish that we had HB 5 years ago on this roster. Now it would be insane. It would have been something, but he helped get us to this point, and he helped us at the end of the day get better by allowing this to happen and to get DeMar here. So HB, thank you, for that, because he was a great player when he was here, and he was a part of so many big moments. So, got to say goodbye to him first.
He was major on the court, and he was major off the court as well. And I'm talking about in the community. He really was one of the one of the biggest names to hit the community for the Kings in a long time. And I mean that in the sense of he's had such an enormous impact on this fan base. Like, we could sit here and we're like, we should trade Harrison Barnes for X, Y, or Z, right? But ultimately, it happened. And as hyped as I was about getting DeMar, I felt pretty sad that we were losing the Black Falcon. Like, that was our guy. Like, if 5 years ago when we traded for him, mid-game, he hops off the court, he takes a seat on the bench and finds out I got traded to Sacramento, who's in a complete and utter rebuilding stage. Like, it's just, he came to Sacramento and was the ultimate professional, like you said. And you can't expect that out of the vast majority of players in this league. And that's something that Spurs fans can look forward to in getting. And that's like landing Harrison Barnes for them. I could argue that they won the trade in a lot of ways because they just got Chris Paul. Now they've got Harrison Barnes to pair with Wemby. He's got vets to work around now.
Yeah.
Like, San Antonio is building the ball club now. And all of a sudden it looks like they could, be in contention for like the 9th or 10th, maybe the 8th seed in the West. So, shout out to HB. And Chris Duarte was here for a season. Like, he didn't get the playing time we probably expected him to.
Yeah.
But I do think that the minutes that he played, they were impactful. It was up and downs with him, but that's a lot to do with the fact that, the rotations and everything just never really gave him a legit shot. Yeah. So here's to hoping that he gets some deeper runs with Chicago.
Yeah, and he's only got time. Like, he was only in his 3rd season, so the best is yet to come. And on a Bulls team, I think he will help provide depth there too. And they still have moves to make, so he might end up cracking the rotation. So hopefully, best of luck to him. He was a great guy here too. I agree. So I want to talk about DeMar a little bit and just kind of what this means moving forward. Because like you mentioned at the beginning of it, this is the biggest signing that Sacramento has had. And it's I don't know how to describe it. It's not like anything over the top, but I think it just means so much to Sacramento that, and to us as fans, that a player of DeMar's caliber, who, he might be at the later stages of his career, is still a valuable player. He's still arguably a top 25 player at his best. And like, he's healthy, and he's one of the most consistent mid-range, purest, old school NBA players we have left in the league. And people question the fit here in Sacramento, and I disagree in the sense that I think he's exactly what this Kings team needs to take another step. You get one of the most savvy veterans who's consistent every single night. I think he only had 6 games last year where he scored 15 points or less, and he's still averaging 24 points, 5 assists, and about 4.5, 5 boards a game, shooting at about 48% from the field, with a lot of those being just mid-range shots, contested mid-range shots. And on top of that, you pair him with Foxy in the clutch, and these are literally the guys who have scored the most fourth quarter points over the past 2 seasons together on the same team. And they're also on the same team with the best player in overtime in Malik Monk, who also re-signed this offseason. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic with DeMar DeRozan here. And it's not just what he can do for us on a night-to-night basis, like individually, but what he can do for us in the future by being able to practice alongside Keegan Murray every day and pass some knowledge to De'Aaron Fox. This was a huge move and something that needed to happen. If this was kind of the risk we were hoping for, and it's not even that big of a risk. because you're signing him to a $24 million a year contract. The third year is non-guaranteed. And then you get to watch Philadelphia panic sign Paul George for 4 years, $212 million, and that averages out to $53 million a year for a player who statistically was not on the same level as DeMar and is on the court half the time. So huge win. My initial reaction was just insane because he was a better fit than a lot of these guys we talked about, and we didn't even think he was an option up until about a week ago, which was even better.
Yeah, so, Kings fans, us Kings fans, we all had this natural reaction, this of just excitement, right? Because you and I came on this pod last week and talked about how it's difficult in the past for the Kings to obtain and retain free agents. And they got Malik Monk, and we were hyped about that. I'm still hyped about that, right?
Exactly.
But we were like, this is one of the best, retaining of a free agents that we've ever gotten, and yada yada. But now we just landed yet another amazing free agent. And you're starting to see this. I feel like I'm starting to see a trend kind of break open. It's the beginning stages where Sacramento is becoming a landing spot. And that's exciting to me, especially when we look at what this Kings team has done in the last 2 seasons. I know last year was a play-in exit, but there were so many reasons why it shook down the way it did, okay? Injuries, rotations, missing pieces, like we talked about it. Going into this offseason, there were holes that needed to be addressed, and Monty has filled so many of them in such a short period of time. He re-signed his head coach. He extended his head coach. He re-signed Malik Monk. He landed probably the best free agent on the market at the time. And he drafted a guy, which we'll talk about, that I think is going to be really great for the Kings moving forward in their future. And he's continuing to show this just utmost professional patience. And I know we sat here and we're like a week into free agency almost, and we're like, what is he doing? Make a move. You're not doing anything, and all these teams around you are getting better. Realistically, the entire time he was just kind of playing the table. And he's looking around and he's like, I don't really want to pay that much money. I don't really want to give up Keegan here. I don't want to, X, Y, or Z. He lands freaking DeMar DeRozan on a $75 million 3-year. That's phenomenal, man. That's to not only get a free agent of his caliber, but to do it at the money that you're paying him. That's huge. That means that we can continue to build this team now going forward too. It's massive.
Yeah, and when we think about DeMar and how he's going to impact this team, we talk about missing elements to this team, and when Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter got hurt, we lacked a secondary scorer behind De'Aaron Fox, and DeMar brings not only a secondary scorer, but he is a primary scorer. And in Sacramento, he doesn't have to carry this team the way that he had to in Chicago because of the injuries that they had to deal with and the constant shifting. DeMar is going to come into a situation with another high-profile scorer and a big man who knows how to pass and screen anybody else open. You know how we run that action for Kevin Huerter, and you see Kevin Huerter just running with nobody. And then imagine that being DeMar DeRozan, and then he gets to take a dribble and just drain a mid-range shot. He's going to have so much more space that he doesn't even have to create on his own anymore. And he fits seamlessly into the system because now all of a sudden this offense is officially 3 levels dangerous, where Foxy and Malik were really our main mid-range shooters, and all of a sudden you add the best mid-range shooter to the fold, and now we're a threat at all 3 levels. We don't have to worry about Domas needing to take more shots from the mid-range or anything. He can focus on just doing what he does best, and DeMar's going to get him open looks because DeMar's a willing passer too. He just adds an element to this offense that we were missing down the stretch last year. And for those who say, the Kings are an offensive team, of course we are. But especially after the Monk and Huerter injuries, what did we become? We became a defense first team. And there wasn't stroke of luck. And our offense also wasn't totally sputtering either. But we were winning games because of our defense. We had a top 5 rated defense throughout the entire last month and a half of the year. And a huge part of that was Keon Ellis. But I also think that it was the team as a whole figuring out how to play defense together. The communication was there, everything, all those little things. DeMar can play team defense. You can slide him in. We're not asking him to be a defensive plus. Yeah, we replaced him for Harrison Barnes. That's a pretty solid trade-off defensively. I just think that there's so many things that he does that adds to our strengths, and I think that makes us dangerous.
It absolutely does. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to try not to get mad when I ask this. Why is the media not giving the love to the Kings that they deserve in a move like this?
It's because they wanted the Lakers or the Clippers to get DeMar. It's not. It's better for the script. It's better for the NBA that he goes to a high-profile team, not a team that they think he's just going to hide there now.
Absolutely, it's so wild to me that if DeMar had landed in, let's just say in a big market, okay, I'm not even going to go into the LA teams. If he landed in a big market or a team that actually people wanted to actually see him go to, because nobody wants to see the Kings get good. Nobody cares about the Kings, right? If he went to a team that actually mattered, they wouldn't be saying any of the things they do about DeMar. They wouldn't be saying, oh, well, he's over the hill. He's coming down. He's not going to be a good fit because of X, Y. Like, none of this would have been a question. Regardless of the fit, it's like, oh, he's on this team now. Like, they're going to be so much better.
Well, think about it this way, too. It's not just like, him not going to a high profile team, but the narrative switches. It's like, oh, Sacramento's not a DeRozan away. This doesn't make much sense. But then if he went to the Lakers, they're like, they were a DeRozan away. This is what they needed.
Right.
Like they're gonna win a title now, and that is. And they would have said the same thing with the Clippers. They would have been like, oh, him and Kawhi, like that's good enough to win them a title. But in Sacramento, it's not, apparently. Even though we have two players who are all NBA caliber, and DeMar is still a borderline all-star, and he will be at least through this season at his age 35. The drop-off doesn't really start happening until the year after. And we're banking on not having to put all the pressure on DeMar. He played the most minutes. That's not going to happen here. The rotations are going to be different. Mike Brown doesn't play his guys that much like that unless it's necessary. And so we get to still keep the mileage on DeMar and just, you're like, hey, you're going to be our third option. Just cook. Like that's all you got to do. And he'll have, this team is better equipped to give him the spacing that he needs versus a team like Chicago who didn't really have the same threats that we do. And so I think it's just offensively, it makes so much sense. So I don't think it impacts us that much worse defensively. So I think it's a win, but I agree that we're not a DeMar away. We still have moves that we can make, but this makes us a playoff team. At least that's the expectation now moving forward. So if, we'll talk about that in a minute because there's been so many moves that happened, but because of all these moves, the Kings are in position. It's not last year. Last year was a crap heap of just good teams in the West Coast. That's not happening in the conference anymore. Like guys left, teams are going to fall, teams are going to come up, and it's going to even out a lot smoother to where a 48-50 win season will guarantee you a top 6 spot. And that's something this team is capable of doing again, especially with DeMar.
I 100% agree. And a lot of why I get upset with those reports is because I've seen them for so many years, but especially in regard to this, they talk about how he's not going to be a good fit. When I really look at what this team lacked at the end of the season, obviously was availability. It was number one. Well, DeMar's got awesome availability. Knock on wood. Number two, how many times last year did you and I talk about the Kings are struggling to like close a game out, like get a bucket down the stretch that just needed to happen, or stop the bleeding on a 20-0 run? Like how many 30-4 runs did we see?
Yeah.
Like there were so many scenarios where, especially when Kevin Huerter and Malik went out, we lost two guys who spaced the floor, and in Malik, we lost a playmaker, right? And all of a sudden, you saw this team get super stagnant in the half court. Well, DeMar DeRozan is an awesome half-court basketball player. And so all I'm seeing are just so many good fits from top to bottom for DeMar being in Sacramento. And I'm looking at this team and what they were missing. He doesn't fill every gap, no, but he answers a lot of them. Immediately. He answers a lot of them. And to be able to rely on a guy like that when you need a bucket, okay, go get the best mid-range shooter in the league. Go get the best ISO player in the league right now. Like, you have this guy now. And I'm looking at his playmaking when he was, he bounced around. He went from Toronto to San Antonio to Chicago and now to Sacramento. He's never played with a playmaker and a ball handler like De'Aaron Fox. He's never had that guy.
Yeah, the closest thing he had was prime Kyle Lowry. Still,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
And that's not even that great. And he's never had a center that can facilitate the offense the way that Sabonis does. There's so many things that DeMar hasn't had an opportunity to experience that he's going to in Sacramento. And I think that's a lot of the reason why that was his number one spot. Like, Saturday happened so freaking quickly. Yeah. And I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but Saturday was a blur. And I think DeMar would kind of say the same, because it felt like he was wherever he was at, not in Sacramento to start the day. And then all of a sudden we find out he's going to be coming to Sac this weekend. It wasn't even said like Saturday. It was this weekend. He'll be visiting Sacramento and meeting with the Sacramento Kings. And we're like, all right, cool. Probably going to be tomorrow. Oh, DeMar's in the air. Oh, he's landing in Sac, now. Oh, he's at the facility. Oh, he's at Mercedes-Benz in Sacramento. He's like, all of a sudden, everything was playing out super quickly. And I think that DeMar looked at his options a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, and he's looking at all the places he could go. California is his home, like his home state. Obviously, he's from Compton. He's still 8 hours away, at least, from there, being in Sac, but he's back in his home state. And to play with a team that has De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, who has a winning mentality right now that he hasn't experienced probably since San Antonio. Like, that's a breath of fresh air for him in a lot of ways. And so it seems like everything kind of lines up perfectly. He's the perfect fit for Sac. Sac is a perfect fit for him right now, where he's at in his career. It's just, it kind of seems like it's icing on the cake. This could be something nasty, man.
Yeah, I think the whole destination of it all, like you said, Sacramento becoming a destination, it was a point of emphasis. Like, I think Monty was able to sell him on that. And the fact that he gets a role that is fitting of a player of his caliber and at his age, I think, they could have an honest conversation about that. And I feel like with the contract, he could have gotten more money. I feel like DeMar DeRozan could have gotten more money somewhere. Like, I know for teams that had the cap space, and Sacramento just really took advantage of that. And, they said De'Aaron Fox was a huge part of getting him over here. Like, you hear our players influencing other players to come play here, which is huge. And this all happened. He was in the facility, and the Kings had their first summer league game at the California Classic. And the games were going on, and the A team had their game at 7:30, and DeMar's still in the facilities. And then they did he's all of a sudden he's on the court. He's on the summer league court. Oh, he's in Sacramento. They announced the signing. They're playing Not Like Us in the background. And for those who don't know, Not Like Us is a song by Kendrick Lamar, and DeMar was featured in the video. And because they're both Kendrick and DeMar from Compton, they're close and super cool like that. But that song was playing in the background, and they've introduced him as a Sacramento King. And the crowd in a lower bowl going nuts as if, we just won a huge game against Golden State or something like that. Like,
yeah,
it was loud, and DeMar was just cheesing the whole time. He's there with De'Aaron and Rashay Fox, and Devin Carter was there.
Carter. Mm-hmm.
So with Vivek, so they were all there, and it was this moment that just felt like it was a match made in heaven. And that's something. And DeMar was excited about the beam. He said, like, as an opposing player, like, he wanted to shut down the beam, like, not here, and now he gets to be a reason that it's lit. He thought that was a super cool concept. So it's like there's things about Sacramento that have changed in this new era of Kings that makes us a lot better, and I'm excited. And it's then there's more that can be done, and he'll just have an impact. And he doesn't, even if he declines slightly every year that he's here, we're going to get better because of him, and we're going to be better positioned to handle that. And I think that was a part of the conversation too. So that's is class act move by DeMar for, coming here and taking a chance on us. And just like we were able to give a chance to him, and shout out Monty for getting this done, because, he was under the microscope and he stepped up in a huge way again, like he normally does. So.
Yeah, he absolutely did. There's one last thing that I want to bring to the table regarding this signing, and I think it's overlooked in a lot of ways. Let's think back for a second to when the Sacramento Kings first signed Mike Brown. And we sign him, like, he starts doing these media days, interviews and stuff. And you start to kind of see his swagger, and it kind of rubs off on the organization, on the players. And then they start the season, and you're like, oh no, this is like a Mike Brown swagger team. Like, they're feeding off this guy. I think that something very similar could happen with the DeMar signing, because DeMar brings a swagger in and of himself. Like, he's somebody who, we talk about how decorated he is. He's a 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA. He's the first player in NBA history to have back-to-back games and buzzer beaters. Like, he former clutch player of the year and also runner-up. Like, he's a baller, and he's bringing a swagger to Sacramento that is just going to add to what's going on. And I think a lot of these guys, not just the organization, but specifically the players on the court with this guy, are going to feed off of him. And I would not be surprised if the start of the season is a hot one.
Yeah, and I mean, I can just imagine the tunnel walkthrough, seeing DeMar and Malik all dressed up, because they just have so much drift, so much swagger. And same with like Devin Carter. Like, this is going to be a fun team. This is a cool team. And it's far from complete. And let's talk a little bit about that too. I'm curious on your take from it. Like, based off of the roster that we have right now. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Devin Carter will not be in this lineup because he's recovering from surgery. So what for you, what do you think the day one starting lineup's going to be? I'm curious right now.
What do I think it's going to be, or what do I want it to be? I think
let's do what you think first. I'm curious.
What I think it's going to be is Fox, Keon, DeMar, Keegan, and Sabonis. Yeah.
Why? Okay, so why not Malik? Why not Kevin?
Well, the reason I would put Keon in the starting role is he started close to like 25 games for us towards the end of the year last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's already kind of gotten that starting role presence. And when I'm looking at the glaring issue on the court, if Malik is out there versus Keon, it's that we really don't have defense other than Keegan. And that's not to say other guys can't play defense. Like, Fox has obviously led the league in steals, right? But I think to have a guy like Keon, who is like a defensive specialist, when you've got all that firepower offensively already through 1 through 4, like, I just feel like Keon might be the better fit. But to close games, you got to have Malik out there in place of Keon. Like, there's almost no question.
Well, I guess depending on the matchup, right? But especially if Keon, who's showing a little bit of in the summer league, is he might be able to provide a spark offensively enough that'll keep him in here, right? But let me ask you this then, because you said Monk as your other option, at least to finish games, right? But Keon only got this job or the starting position last year because Kevin Huerter ended up getting hurt. So why not put Kevin in the starting lineup? Because that's where he's been the most when he's healthy. Do you think that they're gonna pull the plug on that and have him come off the bench? I guess is what I'm saying.
I have a feeling that initially he's going to come off the bench, and he has a good chance to get that starting role back. I just feel like we've talked about how poor his defense is, right? He's probably the worst defender on the team. And I'm not really trying to like rip him or anything, but it's just kind of a fact. And his offense, with how inconsistent it was last year, you go into this season and you're like, we can't open up the season with a low like that. And so I can definitely see, considering the injury he had, obviously he's shooting the basketball again right now, and he'll be back fully healthy. But I can definitely see us rolling him back into the lineup as like a seventh, eighth man off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And if that offense shows that it far exceeds his defensive woes, yeah, throw him back in the starting lineup.
I like that, and I agree, because this is just to kind of start the dialogue, because those are things we need to think about, and we don't know how loyal Mike is, because he seems to be pretty loyal to Kevin, even though he gave him that temporary benching but then brought him back, right? I think he does that because he is a player's coach and he knows how to get the most out of these guys. And I know with Kevin it's hard because he's on the trading block. Like, he's next to go, but in my opinion, but I think, the injury to Devin Carter prolongs his time here and also gives him a chance to, if he's nervous about leaving, boost his stock, play to the best of his ability while he's here. So hopefully that motivates him and he doesn't shrink in the moment, because every shooters go through bad slumps, bad seasons sometimes. It's not out of the realm possibility that Kevin comes out and plays like the Kevin of 2022. And, but me personally, I agree with your starting five, Foxy, Keon, DeMar, Keegan, and Domas. So I agree with that. With Malik finishing or coming off the bench, it depends on the matchup too. Like, the thing about like starting lineups is you don't want to adjust those off the bat for the matchup base, right? But having Malik at the end of games is going to be lethal, especially with DeMar and Foxy, especially when they're all going. And I think Malik is out here to prove with this signing. Like, he has 4 years now. Like, he can prove that he can be a starter if he ups his game defensively, and I think he knows that's what it's going to take. So
yeah, 100%. And it's hard to say what that starting lineup is going to look like, and even how it's going to shake down in terms of what it looks like on the court together, until we actually get 25 games under the belt with these guys. Because for all we know, the best option could very well be Kevin, and then closing the games with Monk. It might be starting Monk. It might be starting. There's so many potential lineups that kind of shift that two guard in and out. But there's a lot of different looks that we can give teams, at least offensively. Defensively is kind of where our holes are at. And I would say, like, as it sits, the Kings don't need to improve offensively anymore. You could win a title with the offense that they have right now. The problem is you need to have defense to back it up. When you look at the teams who were in the Final Four in the playoffs this year, like, they all knew how to play defense. Every single one of them. And looking at the teams who made it to the finals, Dallas was one of the better defensive teams towards the end of the year. They were also cooking offensively too. And so I'm looking at Boston, I'm looking at Dallas, I'm looking at Indiana, unfortunately. I'm looking at teams like that have firepower and can back up on the defensive end too. You don't have to be elite like Boston, especially when you got the firepower that you do in the Kings. And in this Western Conference, like, Dallas is going to be tough. Nuggets are still going to be a tough one because of Jokic, of course. Like, there's still teams that you've got to bring your best defensive games against.
Yep.
But I do believe the Kings can outgun anybody in the West right now. Maybe not OKC. OKC might be the one that could be tough. But even that, I feel like the Kings are at that level of 2022, where they were the best offensive team in the league. Like, if this team, the way it looks on paper, shows up the way that we expect them to, they are one of the best, if not the best, offensive team again in the league.
I completely agree. And again, that's not that far out of the realm of possibility. We weren't that bad offensively last year. Yes, we sputtered, but we were still 9th in offensive rating. So it's one of those things where you add a DeMar element to this team and they all of a sudden become way more dynamic. And this is something that I think will take time. And I think these guys get, that's the whole point of bringing Fox into this mix of having him influence DeMar to come here. Like, there's a want for all parties to make this work. And it's not somebody just being thrown in there and saying, you now have to get along. So this is going to be really cool. And this gives guys like Keegan a chance to grow the way that we kind of want him to. Like, I think that he's being a little rushed, but I understand because we're in this standard of success. But it takes guys like, people appreciate like Chris Middleton, but it took him 8 years to get to the level he was. Not that I'm saying we can wait 8 years for Keegan, but I'm just saying that especially in the forward position, it takes guys a second. And I think Keegan is like a year or two away from really being what we want him to be. And I think by the time it's time to pay him, he's going to really be at that level that we want him to be. And
especially learning from DeMar.
Exactly. And that's something that I think is huge. And it improves his offense and defense because he's going up against one of the best mid-range creators and shot creators in this league. So it's really, I just think it's a win-win for all parties involved. And man, the expectation, has to be, it can't be, I don't even think, I think a play-in would be disappointing, I think, if we're not a top 6 seed and in a position to win a series, because that's the next step we have to take, is give us a playoff series win. Because you've seen teams like the Timberwolves go through a similar streak where, they would make the playoffs, but couldn't win a freaking series until last year. And that was something that we've gotten inch by inch with this team. And I'm hoping that they can take just at least a step versus they don't have to kick down the door. They just got to take a step up. And I think they're able to do that this year.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that you touched on a little bit. The West isn't the absolute powerhouse that it was, but there's no denying it's still deep. It's probably 13 teams deep. And I say that with confidence because I looked up and down the standings a few times, and I'm looking at guys like Ja Morant coming back, and the Grizzlies are going to be somewhat of a problem again, and that kind of a thing. And then I'm looking at that, and I'm like, there's probably 13 teams in the West that have a legit shot at 10 through 1, and or at least 10 through I'll say 6. And I'm looking at the Kings, and I don't see how on paper how you can end below 6. And I would 100% agree with you. Like, if the Kings don't win a series this year, if the offseason stops right now, put a pin on it, right? I would still expect the Kings to win a playoff series this year. And if you don't win a playoff series, I'm not going to say that all your offseason moves were for nothing, but at that point, it's like, okay, now we've really got a problem. Because
chance missed.
Yeah, this is 1 year off of DeMar. Like, this is another year closer to Foxy leaving. Like, now we've got a very glaring issue. Like, there's going to bring a lot of questions to the table that really you don't want to answer or have to ask if the Kings miss the playoffs or don't, at least win a playoff series.
Yeah, especially if things go like right for us. Like, if everything was grooving this year and we have the luck, it would be disappointing. So let's talk about, actually, before we get into like the whole West of it all, because this next part is involved. We'll have plenty more to say with DeMar here in this segment too, but let's talk about the draft a little bit. So the Kings, this is, a few weeks ago now, that at the end of June since we talked, so we haven't really gotten the chance to do it. We did the pre-draft and the guys who we thought, and a lot of those guys went right around the range that we were hoping for. But when the Kings were on the clock at 13 and we still hadn't had a trade yet, and we're like, are they going to take this pick? Okay, they're going to take this pick. Who are we going to get? and there was a lot of options on the board. Like Khalil Ware was on the board, Tristan Da Silva, Jared McCain, Deron Holmes. Like there was a lot of guys. The guys who are still available. And the guy that they ended up picking was Devin Carter, from the guard from Providence.
Why does that name sound familiar?
Oh man, he could have been like my favorite prospect going into this thing.
Oh, that's
I probably
right.
talk about him over and over again. So it was no surprise here that I was like super high on Devin Carter going into this. And for all the reasons of all the measurables make sense, like yes, it's another guard. But that also signaled to us, hey, Kevin Huerter's expendable now. Harrison Barnes, now these moves make sense because why are we going so guard heavy? Something needs to change here. And what Devin Carter brings is, Big East Player of the Year in a conference that featured Donovan Clingan and Stephon Castle, guys that went ahead of him. He was also the Defensive Player of the Year at 6'2", and what he brings to the table is just versatility, and he brings us like a Drew Holiday, Derek White style guy that this team has potentially in Keon. So all of a sudden, wait, now we might have our Drew Holiday, Derek White on this roster for the minimum, for cheap. And Devin Carter is just a versatile player who plays bigger than his size because of his wingspan at 6'9", and he's just a winner. And his dad, also 13-year NBA vet, played with new king DeMar DeRozan for a brief stint there. So DeMar gets to play with the father and son, which is interesting. And Anthony Carter, his dad, was an assistant coach for the Kings in 2015, 2016 in the dark days. But that also means Devin is familiar. So we get another player who's familiar with Sacramento and what it's all about. And I just think attitude-wise, he's kind of a culture setter that we need to continue to add on this team. So those are all the good things. But then everyone talks about, did the Kings need another guard when you have some of these options here? And then come to find out, as of today, well, we found out a couple days ago, but that he was going to get shoulder surgery. We didn't realize that they knew that he was hurt during the pre-draft process, but we didn't know that it was that serious. And come to find out today, he's out for 6 months. So he won't be back most likely until the All-Star break. Which
that's a hit,
right? Because he was supposed to come in and make an impact right away to this already bolstered roster. And like now the idea of Devin Carter on this roster with DeMar was enticing. And summer league's going on. Now we have all these guys playing. Do you think, do you wish we had picked someone else? Because it's easy in hindsight to say, oh, this was a bad decision, blah, 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 right? Like you'll have fans out there now in Sacramento saying Monty fumbled because, he knew, there was other guys out there. What do you think? What is your take on that? Do you have a side that you prefer in this situation?
It was the right pick. And regardless of his injury and his timeline.
Thank you.
It was the right pick because I'm going to put it this way. Who was on the board at 13 at that time wouldn't have made a bigger impact with availability than Devin will in 6 months when he returns to the court, if that makes sense. Meaning their impact immediately won't be bigger than what Devin's going to bring in 6 months. And I'm a firm believer in that. I know you are. Like, you were high on this guy. When we drafted him, I did a deep dive into it, as I always do. And this kid's awesome. This kid is an absolute workhorse. And I have no doubt in my mind that come the time when he's able to start getting some reps back in, when he's starting to play with this team, he could very well shape into a guy like a Drew Holiday, like a Derek White. Like there's a lot of potential with him as a player. And we talk about Mike Brown guys all the time, guys who are perfect for Mike, right? This guy is the blueprint of Mike Brown. You want a guy who's just going to give you everything, all out effort all the time, who's going to always work. Like, he's Davion Mitchell because Davion had the same tendencies. The problem is Davion didn't have offense. He didn't really have a jump shot. He didn't have the aggressive tendencies. Devin does.
Yeah, and he has the previous NBA experience with his dad. There was an article I saw because it was in honor of the draft and in honor of Bronny James coming into the league, right? So they talked about it's not just Bronny, it's Devin Carter. It's a lot of these guys who've come in with family experience in the game. So they compared. There was this article, I think it was Tom Pelissero from ESPN. He did a study on college players in college, and like if you went to which college, who improved their draft stock and who improved from their draft position and who got worse based off of where they were drafted. And you got Kentucky. Kentucky was the best one. They were performing 23% better than their draft grade. And then like Duke was in there, and a team like Arizona was right in the middle, like 0.01. And I was like, dang, I wish it was better. But then you got Syracuse at the worst, and it was like it was minus 40%. Like they were just terrible. But another one that was added on there and was at the top of the list was sons of former NBA players. And it's because we're seeing a lot more second generation, because there's been some like Austin Rivers for one, like who were pretty recently, but this new era of college players and teenagers coming into the league are from players who have played in the early 2000s, like most recently. So they outperformed their draft position by 33%. And I was like, that's a noticeable difference. And for a guy like Devin Carter, I just think that experience is going to help him and help us a ton, because he's already, and Monty fit the bill of drafting the same player for 3 out of the 4 years, and that's an older guard, right? Like that's his type. That's just what he has a thing for. So that was like a little bit predictable. I thought that right away. I was like, this is a Monty guy too. So no, I just think he checks all the boxes for a kind of player that every team needs, not just the Kings. So
yeah, and I'm also kind of looking at the far future. I'm looking at Keegan post the core we've got now. I'm not going to say a certain player, right? And I'm looking at Keegan when eventually he falls into the role that we want him to, and that's hopefully a number one option. Yeah. And I'm looking at what Devin Carter could look like alongside Keegan, and it's nice because it's a perfect mix of offense and defense, and now you just got to get pieces around them. And there's going to be chances to do that. I mean, I don't see a scenario in the next like 8 years or so where the Kings have to rebuild from the ground up like they've been doing. Like they have pieces now that are great, and they have pieces in a near future that are pretty much guaranteed to be there. And if they want them to, they'll be there in the far future too. And they, there's a mix of youth, a mix of vet. Like it's a great mixed team right now. And I think that's really special. So as far as the Monty type, I totally get it. I know he's an older guard, but he's not old. Yeah. Like he's still young. And he's fitting the Keegan timeline really well.
Yeah, and he'll be able to contribute. Like, yeah, those guys. Like, it was funny because fans were kind of bashing the trade. The media perspective loved the Devin Carter. Everyone was like, this is a great fit for Sacramento. Like, this makes a lot of sense, even though it's another guard. Like, this makes sense. I was actually surprised with how the media portrayed this one, right? Excuse me. But then you go to the fans and they're like, oh, why do we need another guard? But I thought it was funny because less than 24 hours prior to the draft, the Kings almost pulled off the Caruso trade. And I'm like, oh, so you would have been okay with Caruso. So it was interesting.
The difference there would have been we were trading a guard for a guard, most likely.
Right. And I get that. And I totally get that. So but for me, it kind of felt like the same, right? Because you get Devin Carter, and then we're going to eventually be trading these guards to clear up space. And for me, that was my thought. I was like, why is everyone so mad about this? This guy's awesome. So,
but I mean, initial reaction, I had it too. I was kind of like, yeah, I was your guy, but I'm like, we don't need another guard. Like, what are we doing right now? And it's like, we have 8 guards on our team. Like Monty at this point, just trade for anybody just to get some guards off this team. And obviously, here we are a couple weeks later. It's feeling a little bit better. We still have
tons of guards,
a lot of guards, but we're not where we were at. But even that I think could change because we talk about those potential off-season moves. But initial reaction, like I was I was kind of like, why? Like, why are we doing this?
Right.
Especially knowing we still had Davion. And I'm like, he's basically just Davion Mitchell, but with a jump shot. So unless you're replacing Davion, which good luck, Davion. Love
That's
everything
true.
you brought to Sacktown.
Yes.
Shout out. He was awesome.
Off
But
night.
yeah, shout out off night. But he's basically like an off night with a jump shot. So I'm like, if you don't move on from off night, this makes absolutely no sense. But he did it. So that's why it does make a lot of sense to me personally.
Yeah, and there's the good thing about Devin and the good thing about guys like Devin and guys like Keon is they provide a level of versatility because they might be a little small, but they play bigger than their size and they can guard up in size. And there's a world where we can play Foxy, Carter, and Keon all at the same time, and we wouldn't have to be sacrificing that much defensively, even though we are undersized. And one thing that, an underrated aspect of Carter's game that made him so crucial because he's kind of that glue guy who does a little bit of everything. 6'2", averaged 9 rebounds in the Big East. And that's just something you can't teach. Like that's hustle. This guy knows how to get in the right spots.
That's
and he
IQ
knows
too.
Yeah, like he is a smart player. That's savvy. And he's not afraid to get dirty. Like that's just you got a guy with that kind of attitude. That's infectious. Like and
that part.
You're gonna watch this guy stuff some people who are bigger than him, and it's gonna be electric. Like he's gonna be electric, and he had the highest vertical in this draft at 42 inches. We're gonna see a cool dunk or two from this guy, and so that it just adds another level of coolness to this team. This guy he just has a nice energy to him, and I think that he's the perfect fit for this team. And sure, I'm seeing, and now that summer league's going on, right, and you're seeing Khalil Ware from Miami, who got picked 2 picks later, who's a center, who could have been like a super smooth backup for Domas, and again, one of my guys, so I hope he does really well. But I can't be mad at the Devin Carter pick because it was a pick here. You want to pick the best player available. He was the best player available, and but it was kind of a steal at that spot. Like he was rumored to be a top 10 guy, and excuse me, and then we were able to get him at 13, and I couldn't have been happier. When you said Devin Carter, I was like, oh, he's mad right now, but I'm freaking jumping up and down with joy right now. So I was like, I'll let the patience out, and then I'll convince him later. Like this will be fine.
That's the problem with me is I have all these initial reactions that are, maybe a little exaggerated, but I'm a Kings fan. I'm a Niners fan. I've been through some heartbreak in my life, so
it's hard. I get it. It's the trauma. Honestly, the main takeaway for me was I did all this draft study this year, and they actually bore fruit. Like they drafted the guys who I was like super high on. So I'm more excited to see how this turns out. Like I'm banking super hard. I'm like, these guys need to succeed for me because I was really high on these guys.
So dream scenario coming out of the draft. Obviously we talked about the timetable for Devin's return is placing him somewhere around January. The dream scenario is the Sacramento Kings are just hitting on all gears. They're positioned really well in the West. And the one thing that they're kind of missing is a defensive presence at the 1 and 2 spot. And insert a guy like Devin Carter in January to get him ready for the playoffs. And, if it works out that way, that's going to be nice. It's going to be really nice.
And if worse comes to worse, like you have a Keon and or Malik replacement, if 4 years down the line, when it's time to sign him, he becomes that piece. So, and he's someone that you can just see long-term making all the right plays and just being that guy you want on your team and that guy you're going to sign. So I'm excited. That's all I can say. And
I am too.
And it hurts knowing that because I thought he was going to be coming back a little sooner, even though the injury, I didn't realize it was a torn labrum, and that's 6 months is a legit amount of time. But apparently he was playing through this injury in Providence too, because he said he tweeted that he tweeted to Providence. He's like, I really played for you guys with my shoulder like this. It was something like that line. It wasn't specifically like it, but he referenced that he's had this injury for a minute. And that means the Kings knew about it going in. So I also trust Monty's decision-making in that sense because it's a surprise to us as fans, but there's no way that they didn't already know about it. So that's the thing that I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust this process and know that even though he's coming back later, he's still gonna, and he'll have runway. I think the Kings will be in a good enough spot where like we don't even have to thrust him right into it. Like, he can get 8 to 10 minutes a game, or he can rehab in the G League to start, and then when he's ready, just come on and make a difference. Like, get used to the speed of it. So he's going to hit that rookie wall come playoff time, but we're going to get a fresh Devin Carter midway through the year. That might just be the perfect infusion of energy that we'll need at that point when guys are a little worn down. So I think in the long run, it'll benefit us. And again, the Sacramento training staff is awesome. These guys have bounced back pretty well. So I'm interested to see. I'm just waiting to see when, how much better this team will be. And in a way, it's kind of nice knowing that down the line, we're going to get Devin Carter. So we could we could have a really nice record, and in the back of the mind, we're like, oh my gosh, we're getting Devin Carter in January. Like, we don't even have to do a trade deadline thing. Like, we're getting this guy. So it's kind of how I take it from a optimistic side of things.
It's a great side to be on. I do think too, like, if the worst thing that Monty has done in his tenure with the Sacramento Kings was stay complacent, there's no reason to think that Devin was a bad pick and that DeMar was a bad trade. Like, I truly believe, and I think you're in agreement, that the worst thing that he's done was stay complacent last year and not make any moves. Like, run this thing back. And I will live with that, considering all the moves that he has made since coming to Sacramento, landing Sabonis, getting Mike Brown on his team, like, just building what this team really embodies right now, the culture, the everything that they're about. I have no reason to think that Devin Carter was a bad move, even though in the immediate, I was frustrated with the position. That's one thing too. I'm just add.
No, you're good.
I was mad at the position that we drafted.
Yeah,
I wasn't mad at the player that we drafted.
That's a great point. And along with Monty too, one thing I don't think we give him enough credit for is the fact that 3 out of his 4 picks have hit into legit draft picks. So you got Tyrese hiding out over there in Indiana as an All-NBA player, and then you got freaking Keegan over here dominating, and Devin could be that next plug. And if your worst pick is Davion Mitchell, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. So he knows what he's doing, I think. And I think but it's tough, right? We're Kings fans, so we're traumatized. We don't know for sure. Like, if we're not being told what the plan is, we're nervous. Like, we need to know what the plan is here. But Monty's already had the plan going since day one, so I can't hate.
Definitely.
Yeah. So okay. So we talked about the draft. Were there any guys that, like, you're seeing now in Summer League that you think, and like, I know not having watched every game or anything, but like, were there guys that you were surprised ended up on certain teams? Like, maybe in a good way or in a bad way. Like, what do you think about, like,
just the King squads?
No, for like for in general, like, any players that you were surprised, like Edey going to Memphis or something like that. Like, I don't know if that does anything for you. You know what I mean?
Because, actually, yeah, Edey going to Memphis, I think he's not going to be the reason they win, but he's going to set some mean screens for Ja. And that's kind of scary to think. Mm-hmm. Like, Ja coming downhill already is kind of scary. And now he's got, JJ and Zach Edey to run pick and rolls with. And all of a sudden, Memphis looks like they could be running a 1-2 game as elite as anybody in the league. So yeah, I like that. I don't believe that Necht is going to move the needle for the Lakers.
Same.
I think he's good. I think he's going to be good. He's similar to, like, JJ. And so I think JJ is going to know how to use him.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just don't see him taking them to another level at any point in his career. Obviously, time will tell.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, honestly, the Timberwolves landing, I'm blanking on his name right now. Dillingham was pretty good for them.
Really? I thought it was interesting. I don't know how much he's going to play.
He's not going to play that much, but yeah. I mean, what did we just talk about with the timelines? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Dillingham getting to play along with these guys and learn behind freaking Anthony Edwards. Like,
yeah,
dude, it's going to be nasty in a few years. I think if he develops the way that Minnesota's wanting him to and expecting him to, they have another building block for the future.
Yeah, worst he could be Malik Monk. Like if he reaches the ceiling, like that could be the potential fit he has. I agree. And like there was a lot of good picks. Like Jared McCain going to Philly, I think they needed a guy like him. Like that was good. Khalil Ware to Miami, that's a nice little fit, especially because that team's about to go through a rebuild, getting rid of Jimmy, so they have to really figure that out. But Khalil looked nasty, so I was happy to see him. And you saw a lot of these guys go to teams that like they're kind of shining on. Like Edey had a really good game, and you know, obviously the talk of the draft was Bronny, and everyone did the whole thing. He got drafted, great, and then he gets roasted in the summer league. You know, we're hearing about how he's scoring 4 and 3 points. I just wish the poor guy, you know, he's never going to get out of the spotlight, but you know, that's the burden he has to deal with. Yeah. But overall, I think that like I agree with your take. Like let's kind of go down the West real quick and think like, okay, these guys might have drafted well, or now with these injuries, kind of, you know, guys are healing. Who do we think might take some of these spots? Because I think for teams that are going to fall, I think the Warriors are going to take a little bit of a dip because Steph right now is playing in the USA. I think these guys playing in the USA who are a little older, like the Stephs, LeBrons, like I get it. It's important to win a gold medal. Like this is going to be your last chance to do it. But they're kind of older now. And I know they're not playing their hardest, but that means they're still playing overseas and can totally still hurt themselves in a way if they were just training here. And they're just getting more mileage. Because, yeah, the USA can take it nonchalantly for like their first 3 games, but they got teams who really want this thing. Like, and those guys are competitive enough. Of course, they want it. Like, these guys will push hard, but like, these other nations want to beat the USA. The USA has a target on their back, and we're playing all lackadaisical as hell. But, you know, and now that they have Buddy Hield, I don't think the Warriors are the Splash Buddies are gonna be anything. That's a horrible name too.
Warriors fans need to calm down because you guys are in for a reality check with Buddy. That's all I gotta say.
He's gonna have 2 30-point games, and then he's gonna disappear and go 0 for 5, and you're gonna be like, man, I wish every shot looks good, and he's just gonna clank them, and he's gonna be exactly what they thought Klay Thompson was gonna be last year. Like just sit in the corner and hit your 3, and he will every now and again, but he's not going to make as big as an impact as people think. It's just the stats of it all. Like, oh, the top 2 leaders in made threes together. And I'm like, well, there's 2 different, they're completely different players. So it'll be interesting. I don't think the Warriors are going to be able to hang on. Like they don't have the depth unless Kuminga takes like that next step, because that's potentially a thing too. Like he could be awesome, like even more awesome. And that would make them a little bit better. But they're a play-in team to me. And same with the Lakers. The Lakers didn't get any better. They kept saying they were going to sign people, but they couldn't pay anybody. They were stuck. And LeBron took a pay cut just to get them under the second apron, but one move and they're done. And they can't afford anyone legit. So they couldn't have afforded Klay. There are the reports that he was like, 4 years, $80 million for Klay. Like that was on the table. No, it wasn't. They didn't have the money for it. And this I'm not going to rag LeBron on the whole pay cut thing. I think in the right situation he totally would have, but when he found, this isn't a championship team. Even with Connect, like Connect isn't going to move the needle for them. Like they didn't do anything. Like they pulled the Kings of last year, and then you're watching DeMar get signed by Sac, and they're like, oh man, they had the opportunity. They also didn't. DeMar wasn't going to take less money, I don't think, anymore, even more or less than the Lakers aren't that kind of brand anymore, and they have a rookie head coach. Like JJ's never coached before, like in the NBA. Like that means something. So just because you have LeBron as your player coach doesn't mean that your team's gonna be that good. So Connect is JJ Redick 2.0. Like I think they're a perfect match for each other. I think he's gonna find ways to get him open. Like that's great, and I think Connect will enjoy that role as being just like a catch and shoot guy, or like super quick creator, 2 dribbles, pull up. Like he's gonna be a good scorer, I think.
Yeah.
But Foxy's gonna dribble right up to him and blow right by him 99 times out of 100. So like it's I don't think they got any better. And now the Kings are even more equipped to be better than them. And Phoenix is still Phoenix. Like, yeah, they made some good picks. I liked the direction they went, but they are still hurt. Like they're still hurt all the time, and they're never, and like that's just been their whole story. And We saw it with the Clippers. It's not just going to magically change. I don't think. I think, Devin's playing 65 games. Durant's going to play like 65 games. Beal's not even going to be on the court. Like, I don't know how they'll probably sneak into the 6th seed or maybe the 7th, but that's their ceiling. New Orleans is interesting. They don't have a center. They have that Missy guy they drafted, but they traded, Valanciunas went to Washington. And
which is a massive loss for them.
Right. And yeah, they traded for Dejounte Murray and they got rid of Larry Nance, so their other small ball center's gone too. So there's cheap options out there, but that's the thing. They're cheap options. And unless they make another trade for someone legit, which the league's kind of scarce in big men right now that can make an impact. Like every team that's like legit has a legit backup center, which worries me a tiny bit, but that's besides the point. We have a small ball center too in Trey for now, and we'll see, how that goes. But New Orleans, like with Dejounte Murray, it'll be interesting because especially if they're going to re-sign Brandon now that this whole trade talks with him kind of fizzled. He still wants a max contract. So you want 3 guys who kind of need the ball to be effective. That's a little tough. People could say that about Sac. That's not the case though, because Foxy and DeRozan are kind of ball stoppers, but that was given their situations. DeRozan had to carry and Foxy at the end of the year had to carry. Like it was different. So, and it'll be interesting. The West looks interesting. And I think we're right there on that 5th spot. Like that, I think we're going to cleanly fit right in there because we're going to compete with 4th. And I think the 4th might be the Nuggets or the Mavs. And because I think the Klay Thompson move to the Mavericks is kind of overblown. And I think that Klay is going to be fine. He's going to stand in the corner, hit shots. He can't defend anymore. So Luka has to really try on defense. He won't in the regular season. And Kyrie,
I think Klay is going to be a really good addition for them.
I think he's going to be 15 points a game, but I don't think that efficiency is going to be there. It hasn't been these past 2 years. I think he's a shell of himself.
He will literally only be asked to be Peja Stojakovic and sit in the corner. Like that's all he needs to do for that team. And I think he's going to find a new confidence being on a new situation and getting kind of just a fresh, mindset going in. I really do think that Klay's going to impact the team more than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the number 2 or 3 seed.
Okay, that's fair. And I mean, hey, like Derrick Jones Jr. left to LA, but Najee Marshall came in his place, which is a huge loss for New Orleans because he was a dog off the bench with Jose Alvarado. They kind of had that nice little 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
But so Najee going there is going to give him a little bit more of of an energy. And who knows how Derek Lively's going to be in his second year. Like they have a lot of good things going on there.
I like the Clippers. I do want to say that.
Whoa, wait, what? Like really? I think they're going to be like 12th or 13th.
There's a weird part of me that thinks that the Clippers got better after moving on from Paul George.
Okay.
And I'll have more on that once I do a little bit more diving in. But they picked up some good, like Derrick Jones Jr. is there right now. They landed 4 guys recently, and I just think that I gotta again dive into it and have a whole thing on this, but I think they definitely got deeper, and where I'm going with that is the West starting 5s all throughout the West will find a way to balance themselves out, and you'll have your who's better than who, right? Where you're really going to find that impact on the standings and progression throughout the season is who's the deepest team going forward. And those deep teams are going to be the ones ultimately who have the first 6 spots, I think, in the West. It's not going to be who has the best starting 5s because we don't, there's no super team in the West right now, which I love. I mean, it's great for the NBA. And it's exciting. It's like 2 or 3 guys per team at most. And that's killer. Love it. And the Kings have 3. Woo-hoo. But it's the availability is going to be major in this season because every game against all these good teams is going to matter. Depth coming off the bench, because if you don't have that availability, who's the next man up? Do you have that backup center that the Kings don't have? Like, Do you have a wing that can come off the bench when you're missing an option? Like, depth is going to be one of the biggest things in the Western Conference this year. And I'm looking at a team like the Clippers, and they do have some depth. And I'm looking at the Sacramento Kings, and they just, like, there's a couple things that they're missing, and that's that backup center. I know we have Trey Lyles, but, do we have somebody who can impact in a taller way? And, like, do we have a wing who can come off the bench and provide solid minutes defensively when we need some defense? Like, there's missing pieces, of course. But ultimately, yeah, it's going to be depth and availability that determines those top 6 seeds for me.
And I guess that's what I'm worried about with the Clippers is the fact that Kawhi just had to leave Team USA with what they listed as a chronic knee injury. And I'm like, this dude who they couldn't sign Paul George because they have this guy in the max is chronically never available for this team. And they signed James Harden to a $35 million contract. That's another thing too. Like, yeah, like the offloading of Paul George, they kind of had to. They didn't really have they didn't have a choice because they didn't want to go in the second apron because this team doesn't stay healthy enough to win. And I don't think they got, for me personally, I don't think they got that much better because their depth is going to have to naturally move up anyway because Kawhi is going to be unavailable, and James Harden as your number one option outside of Kawhi versus Paul George is scary, especially at this age. He's just going to prime James Harden's going to come back because he's going to take every shot for this team now. He's just going to be like, oh, I can do this now because it's the new arena, and they just need their stars to kind of show out. So I'm interested. I'm a little lower on the Clippers than I was, which is a good thing though, because they were kind of that team that kind of was annoyingly in the way. And they're, for me, we're way better than that team now. And I think that we can leapfrog them. And I think Denver losing KCP is going to suck. They're relying on a lot of their young pieces to help. And they also need to rely on Jamal Murray to stay healthy, which cost them last year. And Joker will keep their head above water like he always does. But I don't know.
Do you think the Kings are better than Denver?
I don't know if they're better, but I think the gap that was there, that existed between us, shrunk even more. Because like last year, we won the series against them. I think we're faster, and now with DeMar, we're even more equipped to attack them. And without KCP, they can't attack us the same either. So they're a team that might have just been a 1-year wonder and might be going down the tubes, or at least kind of crashing back to reality a bit. But I could be wrong, and they could just still be a well-oiled machine and still continue because Jokic is insane. But I don't.
Do you think
OKC
is in that same boat? Do you think OKC was a 1-year wonder?
No, I think that they're built better than Denver because Denver's relying on the true center of it all, and their injury luck's kind of crappy. But OKC's been healthy, and Chet played an entire season, and now they added Isaiah Hartenstein, and they added a new wrinkle to that offense, and they got to sign all their dudes. They're the only team in the West that's truly 12 deep. Like they can run an entire group, and they can deal with injuries now. Like they're perfectly built with wings, with guards, and then they have centers. Like OKC has the potential. I think they're like a year away from like contending truly for the title. I think they need to take like that Minnesota step where they're going to get to the conference finals, and then they'll probably their lack of experience there will probably bite them a little bit against an experienced team like maybe Dallas or maybe Minnesota, depending, or maybe even us if we get lucky. Like, but then again, we'd be in the same boat there. Like, so that would be interesting too. But the Kings have that potential this year. Like in the right matchups, we could ascend just like how Minnesota did, just how Dallas did, with the right matchups and the right injury luck and situations. Every team in the top 6 has a legitimate argument. And then when you look back at 7 or 8, that could be New Orleans, that could be Sacramento, but I think we're in like that 5 to 7 range this year, like guaranteed. But I don't want to be in that 7. I think we're good enough to be in the top 6.
Yeah, and I mean, there's more moves that are going to happen throughout the offseason, and we'll have this conversation again right before the season starts because we'll do our standings where we think we'll be seated and so on.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to kind of wrap it up and summarize, like the Kings are in a good spot right now.
Yeah.
And there's chances to make more moves. But at the same time, like I said, if you end the offseason right now for the Sacramento Kings, it's a W offseason. This is everything we asked and more of them, and I'm excited.
Yeah, this so far has been a great offseason. This was an offseason that needed to happen. Has it been the absolute perfect offseason? No. But this was an offseason that signals a positive change that we can build off of. And we got to retain key figures in this organization, and we got a fun new piece. We got a couple fun new pieces. So it's going to be interesting. And we're back in a way that we're going to be back in the playoffs this year. And it wouldn't be a surprise if we were. So no, this was good. Did you have any final thoughts on the Kings before we change the subject here?
Let's change up.
All right, great. So this was part 1. So we're recording on July 11th. So we're doing a dual recording because since I'm going away to North Carolina for the week, we had a lot to talk about since we already took a little break. So this was part 1. This was all NBA. We're going to switch on over here for part 2, and that's going to come out Monday. And that's going to be Niners talk. We're going to be talking Brandon Ayuk. We're going to be talking about, just kind of what's going on with the Niners there. I want to touch a little bit on Hard Knocks with Saquon. We got some stuff that we want to, get off our chest here because it's been annoying, but now it's starting to calm down a little bit. The Niners and BA kind of want to bring themselves back into the picture and stay relevant for now. So stay tuned. So stay with us on Monday. So we're going to post that. So this was episode 49, part 1 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook, all that fun jazz. And I'm just hyped for the Kings. They just got me in a good space. I'm feeling good, brother.
Yes, sir. I'm in the same boat.
All right. I'm Marcos Conegro, and beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
All right. We'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Peace.